Hi guys, it's me Chaz HD and welcome to this stream tonight where we're going to be covering really the season so far for all the teams and drivers. Mainly, of course, we're going to be focusing on what is the title of this video and the main topic of this stream tonight, which is the drivers' championship fight. The main thing we'll be focusing on from now until the end of the season. The fight for the drivers' title between Max Verstappen, the current world champion, and Charles Leclerc, who of course is trying to break the curse, the championship curse for the Ferrari team. After Max Verstappen's win at Imola, I think we could definitely say with the pace Red Bull showed, and given that if Red Bull had been reliable this season, they would be in a very good position. Red Bull and Verstappen, it would be a lot closer in the Drivers' Championship right now than it actually is. I think we're definitely in for another great title fight, just like last season. Maybe not as great as last season, but it's going to be a very close one between two very talented drivers. But yeah, we're going to get into that this evening. We'll also get into the teams, Ferrari and Red Bull, and how I think they will, based off of what we've seen so far, how they'll probably get on against one another for the rest of the season, because of course they are, the main two teams at the front of the grid. And then after that, we'll get into the rest of the teams, and I'll give my thoughts as to how the season has gone so far, and really how things can improve for the rest of the season for those respective teams, from Mercedes down, of course, to the very bottom, Williams. And yeah, we'll get into how they can improve, and realistically how their season will go. Some teams will probably improve, some teams probably won't, as we'll get into later. And also, I will be getting into a couple bits of news. One bit of news that came out earlier today that I know you guys will be very, 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 very excited by, and we'll get into that later on. And also, make sure, guys, if you are watching, to tune in to the end of this stream, because I will be getting into, at the end of this stream, I'll be getting into my schedule for content for this weekend's Miami Grand Prix. Of course, it's a new month, the month of May. This month we've got 3 Grand Prix. This weekend is Miami, and then at the end of this month we have a double header, the Spanish and Monaco Grand Prix. So, going to be a very important month of racing as we progress in this Formula 1 season. But yeah, Miami is this weekend, and like I said, I will, at the end of this stream, I'll give you guys an update as to what the plan is at the moment when it comes to content for that particular Grand Prix. But we won't get into that just yet, of course, because we need to get into our topics for this stream. I just want to say, though, hopefully you guys are doing well. And hopefully, since the last Grand Prix, hopefully you having a good time of it in your life. And hopefully you'll join me in discussion when it comes to these particular topics. And make sure as well during the stream, and even if you're watching this after the stream is finished, make sure to post your comments either in the live chat, or like I said, if you're watching this after the stream is finished, make sure to post your comments in the comments section down below, giving your side of things when it comes to what I'm talking about. And if you disagree with me with anything, then again, make sure to put it in the chat or the comments section. But let's get into this Verstappen Leclerc fight, and we'll go really from Bahrain, leading up to what happened just over a week ago at Imola. So in Bahrain, it was, to be honest, to me, a slight surprise what happened in Bahrain. I mean, of course, Max and Sergio having a double retirement at the very end of the race, absolutely soul-destroying for the Red Bull team, and a massive shock. F1 cars are pretty reliable these days. You don't really see that often. 2 cars from the same team having reliability issues, unless it's a McLaren Honda situation or something like that. So yeah, that was a very shocking thing to see. But even if Verstappen had finished that race where he would have finished in second place, it was a surprise what happened in Bahrain, because I think after testing where Max had put in a very good lap, and it looked as though that Red Bull was looking, in the hands of Max Verstappen, very strong for the Bahrain Grand Prix. It looked as though he was the slight favourite to win that Grand Prix. But Ferrari with Charles Leclerc, who we know is absolutely fantastic around the Bahrain or the Sakhir International Circuit, putting a fantastic lap in qualifying to get pole position, and then did an absolutely superb job in the race to hold off Max Verstappen. And even when Verstappen, as you can see on the screen, even when Verstappen got past him, did brilliantly to keep calm and get his way back past up to and into turn 4. And I think really that Bahrain Grand Prix was more to do with Charles Leclerc, in terms of Leclerc being faster than Verstappen before, what happened to the two Red Bulls. I think it was more to do with Leclerc's great record and great speed that he has around this circuit that really helped Ferrari stay ahead before Verstappen had that calamitous issue along with Sergio Perez. It was a fantastic performance by him. Ferrari also looks pretty good in the Grand Prix, but Ferrari, I think, coming out of this Grand Prix, no doubt, with the 1-2, what happened with the Red Bulls, they were looking super strong immediately, and it was looking like it was going to be, certainly, a much more confident start to the season for the Ferrari team. Because, of course, if you're a Red Bull team, you know you have a fast car, but you're not sure about your reliability, you're going to have confidence to a certain degree, but you're not going to be as confident as a team like Ferrari, who have proven, on the reliability side, so far, to be pretty good. But then we moved on to the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix. One of the best races so far this season. And you'd have to say Red Bull had the edge that weekend. Sergio Perez, of course, got pole position. Brilliant pole position over Charles Leclerc. Maybe Leclerc without that safety car coming out around, lap 13, lap 14? Right as Sergio Perez pitted, or right after Sergio Perez pitted. Maybe Leclerc still would have got the lead from Perez because it was very close. Leclerc definitely closed the gap towards the end of that first stint of that Grand Prix. But it was unfortunate what happened to Perez. And I think it really... I think Perez could have definitely done and shown a lot more and got a much better result than what he ended up getting, which, of course, was 4th place in that particular Grand Prix. But with the safety car, hampering Perez and swapping the order about a bit, that meant that Charles Leclerc got into the lead, which was quite fortunate, even though his pace was still pretty good. But if it Max Verstappen into second, a guy who, did not have really that good pace in qualifying, or really the Grand Prix up until say the midway point of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, but then eventually the Red Bull started to close in on the Ferrari. The straight line speed advantage also really showed at this particular Grand Prix, and I think it will show once again this weekend in Miami, a track that I think is similar in layout to the Jeddah circuit in Saudi Arabia. So I think we'll see it again this weekend, just how Red Bull are able to, in the sections of circuit where it's just, flat out really, they're able to gain so much time. And we saw that again in Saudi Arabia, in the slipstream, even without DRS, Max Verstappen was able to really close in on Leclerc. And then when he got DRS, Leclerc couldn't really defend that much from Verstappen. He tried to play some games with the DRS into the final corner, but of course Max, from last year, he knows exactly, or knows all about that. And eventually, he was able to outsmart Leclerc, get past him, and win the Grand Prix. It was a fantastic finish to the Grand Prix, though, with them both very close to each other. And it was, I think Leclerc was only like half a second or so behind Verstappen when they crossed the line to finish the Grand Prix. And on reflection, actually, I'd say the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix was probably the best race of the season so far. Which, after the first 4 tracks we've had, I don't think anyone would have predicted that Jeddah circuit would have provided the best race so far. Bahrain was good, but it wasn't great. It wasn't definitely as good as I thought it would be. We saw plenty of racing, again, at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and a very tense and close finish. Australia was okay. And then the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix was good, but I don't think it was the best race of the season so far. But yeah, fantastic battle between the two. But Max Verstappen, thankfully, from Red Bull's point of view, got back on terms and was able to immediately begin to claw back into the lead Leclerc had over him in the Drivers' Championship. And going into the Australian Grand Prix, of course, he was hoping to continue to claw back some points. But Max Verstappen at the Australian Grand Prix had yet another retirement in the Red Bull, and that allowed Charles Leclerc to further extend his championship lead over not just Verstappen but the rest of the field. Leclerc was going to win this race anyway. The Red Bull was just nowhere near really the pace of the Ferrari around that track. The Ferrari was, in the race with Leclerc at the wheel, it was dominantly quick over the rest of the field. The Ferrari was probably half a second quicker than the Red Bull, and then at least a second quicker than, say, the Mercedes, who were probably the third quickest team in that particular Grand Prix. But even though Leclerc was still going to win, again, another reliability problem resulting in an instant retirement and another 18 points gone down the drain. Now, later, I will actually show what the championship would look like if Verstappen and Perez had not had any retirements this season. And it'll show you that even though Ferrari have been good this season, you cannot count out Red Bull at all. They absolutely have the pace. And if they had not had reliability trouble, they absolutely would be in a good position right now. I know, of course, that's all if, buts, and maybes, but just want to prove that Verstappen absolutely can claw back the lead in the championship and make a fight of it. Because I think after Australia, we were thinking, you know what, if Leclerc wins, at Imola, or Verstappen doesn't respond to the next couple races and Leclerc gets another win, then Leclerc's in a very dominant position, and it's looking very, very difficult to say that Max Verstappen can even contend for his second World Championship this season. That's how bad it was looking, really, after Australia, because Leclerc was able to maximise the pain of Verstappen's retirement and, capitalise, of course, Leclerc on Ferrari having such a brilliant car around that circuit. That was probably the best Grand Prix I think Ferrari have had. I mean, of course, Carlos Sainz retired with a very amateur spin into the gravel, but from what they were doing up front, probably the best Grand Prix they've had since 2018. Certainly was the last time I can remember them having a Grand Prix this good, where they were not just leading and winning a race, but it was comfortably. There was no real threat from anyone behind. It was just a brilliant weekend. Leclerc was on top form, Ferrari on top form, and we were all thinking going into Italy and the Grand Prix at Imola, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, given the layout of the track and of course it being a home Grand Prix for Ferrari, that surely Leclerc would have to be the favourite, and it would be very, very hard to stop him and Ferrari when in such good form. But all credit to Verstappen, Perez, and the Red Bull team, because what they did at Imola was something that really a championship winning team does on away territory, which is what they really were at that Grand Prix, because again, they are fighting Ferrari directly this season on away territory, getting pretty much the maximum amount of points you would expect given what actually happened in the sprint race and the actual race on the Sunday. Of course, Max got the pole on the Friday, and then for the sprint, Leclerc did get ahead of him, but Verstappen caught him up and overtook him to win the sprint to get, again, the maximum amount of points. Perez came back from 7th to finish in 3rd. And then on the race on Sunday, Verstappen maintained the lead. Perez got up to 2nd. And except for a brief moment where Leclerc got ahead just after they put dry tyres on, but Perez got back ahead very quickly. Except for that, Red Bull really dominated the race last Sunday and were just absolutely brilliant. Again, they performed exactly how they needed to to respond to what happened in Australia. Hopefully this coming weekend in Miami they won't have yet another setback, but I could honestly see this with, given what happened to Leclerc, which was his own fault, him, pushing way too hard when he didn't have to and almost breaking his car. Very lucky he didn't break his car, Charles Leclerc, with the the suspension. Very, very lucky that he was able to finish in 6th place. This is a result that Red Bull can absolutely build on going forward for certainly the next few races. We know Max Verstappen and Red Bull can go on a run of great results. We saw that last season. With Ferrari, can they go on a run of great results? Yet to be seen. Yet to be seen. We haven't really seen Ferrari go on a run of great results in a long, long time. We're talking well over a decade, really. And when I mean going on a good run, I mean in terms of winning races in a short span of time. Like I said, it's been, I think, well over a decade since they've been able to really do that at a championship winning or very strong championship contending level. So we'll see how Red Bull come out from this. But this Imola race was vitally important for the Verstappen championship bid and for Red Bull to get back at Ferrari. Now, of course, really, let me just decide what thing I'm going to next here. I'll go to this. Right, let me just go to this. So, of course, this image really sums up why Max Verstappen is not quite in a position to be right on the heels of Charles Leclerc in the Drivers' Championship. And even though Red Bull are only 11 points behind Ferrari in the Constructors, really, if they were reliable, they would be in a comfortable position out in front if it had not been for reliability problems such as, around the fuel system. And what it has led to is that despite Red Bull having a quick car and having a car that can certainly fight all season long for every single race win, which we have seen pretty much this season, maybe except the Australian Grand Prix, even though Verstappen still had a chance. One of the safety car restarts, Leclerc made a mistake and Verstappen had a run on him. You never know what could have happened if he got ahead and then, had finished the race. You never know what could have happened there. If they had just stayed reliable, they would be in such a good position. So this is, in terms of the Drivers' Championship, this is the position that Max Verstappen finds himself in now. So that is the top 5 in the Drivers' Championship. Charles Leclerc leads by 27 points, which is still a good lead for Charles Leclerc, but it was a lot more over Verstappen. I think it was 46 points going into the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, so that's a big chunk of his lead taken away, but still a healthy lead for Leclerc, which again, really helped by the Red Bull not being the most reliable. Perez not too far behind Verstappen in 3rd, and then you got Russell quite close to the 2 Red Bulls in 4th, even though the Mercedes car is not even on the same planet really, pace-wise, as the Red Bull or Ferrari cars. Despite that, though, he's only a few points behind the Red Bulls and actually 11 points clear of Carlos Sainz. Shows you how poor, again, reliability has been for Red Bull, how poor Carlos Sainz has been, and how bad his luck at times has been. And also shows you how good Russell has been this season. But what I did was I went back, looked at the 4 races, and I calculated what would the Drivers' Championship look like if Red Bull had finished their races. Again, I know it's a hypothetical scenario, but again, it does prove that despite the gap of 27 points at the moment to Charles Leclerc, it does prove that without a doubt, Max Verstappen can close that gap and still win the championship. Let me just get to it now, and you can see here. So this is what the championship table would look like if Red Bull had no retirements. Max Verstappen would be leading the championship by 10 points. That would be massively benefited by Leclerc making the mistake he did, of course, in the race in Imola. If Leclerc didn't make that mistake, but Verstappen and Red Bull managed to finish all of the races, then it would be, 2 or 3 points in it? But Verstappen would be leading the championship if he had not suffered that bad luck. Leclerc would be second, only 10 points behind. Perez would be in a pretty good position in third, 32 points off the lead. And then you got Russell, Sainz, Norris, Hamilton, Bottas, Ocon in 10th place. It doesn't quite show on the screen, but I'll quickly show it to you guys anyway, would be Kevin Magnussen. But it shows you again, if I just cut back to this, you can see Leclerc on 86, Verstappen on 59. But if things, had gone Verstappen's way, Verstappen had been luckier and not had the bad luck, then, Leclerc would be a point worse off, which is, obviously not a major difference, but Verstappen would have an extra almost 40 points compared to where he is now. So, I have no doubt Max Verstappen can still win this championship. It will still be close all season long. I have no doubt about that. But I still feel as though some people, I think there are plenty of people out there, don't get me wrong, who definitely think there is going to be a close title fight between Leclerc and Verstappen. But I still feel as though there are people out there who are thinking that maybe Leclerc is still in a very comfortable position, which, 27 points is a good gap to have, but only if you've only got 2 or 3 races left. We still have a long way to go, and I think Verstappen and Red Bull have already proven this season that they can absolutely take the fight to Ferrari and win Grand Prix. Now, another thing I want to get into quickly before we get into how I think the teams are going to really perform and the drivers are going to perform going into the next couple races and the rest of the season. Just want to quickly get into why were Red Bull surprisingly quicker than Ferrari at Imola? Because we thought going into Imola that Ferrari would probably be quicker given what we saw in Australia. And if we go and look at the sector time data, here is the sector time data from the Australian Grand Prix. So in the first sector, which was mostly fast but had, some important corners, it was pretty much equal, but it was slightly favouring the Ferrari team. Sector 2, pretty much flat out, but it was, favouring slightly the Red Bull team. So in Sector 1 and Sector 2, which were pretty fast, it was basically equal. But in Sector 3, where all of the real corners were, and they all followed really in a row, Leclerc had a, 10th and a half advantage over the Red Bulls. And that's really what Ferrari had over Red Bull in Australia. And that's what was really making the difference in that Grand Prix. And that's what we thought would make the difference at the Imola Grand Prix, especially in that middle sector at Imola. And I think we did see it kind of in the Grand Prix. 8 or 9 days ago, that the Ferrari in the middle sector was good, but it wasn't performing as well compared to the Red Bull as we expected. Now, the reason that is, and I'll just move on quickly, or back to some of these pictures from the Imola Grand Prix. The reason that is because Ferrari didn't bring any upgrades to the Grand Prix because we had a sprint race, and they didn't want to, I'm guessing, waste any development parts they were going to bring through it getting damaged in the sprint race, which makes sense, but it definitely affected them in the Imola Grand Prix when Red Bull brought a couple updates to the car. Nothing massive, but progressed the car, brought it forward and more up to date with where it needs to be. But the most important thing Red Bull did was they cut the weight of the car by, I just need to quickly look to see how much they cut the weight by, because I want to make sure I get it right. But this was probably the most important reason why Red Bull won the Grand Prix at Imola, because probably the biggest weakness of the Red Bull that we were seeing or hearing of in the first, couple months of the season is that the Red Bull weighed a lot and it was weighing just way too much compared to, say, the Ferrari. But they were able to cut some weight off in between the Australian and Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. And that is what led to, I think, Red Bull getting, getting a lot closer and actually getting ahead of Ferrari in that particular Grand Prix. Let me just quickly see if I could find it. Confirmation. Red Bull reduced its weight handicap and also found a bit of downforce with the new upgrade. Like I said, that's pretty much why they were able to improve. Let me just quickly find it. And by the way, Ferrari didn't bring really anything to Imola. I'm just reading through now. Didn't really bring anything to Imola. What they're doing is they're bringing an upgrade to this weekend's Grand Prix in Miami, which is a rear wing. It's a smaller, say, lower downforce rear wing, and it is really to combat the Red Bull's straight line speed that we've seen this season. And then really the proper first big Ferrari upgrade will be coming at the Barcelona Grand Prix, where I think they're planning to bring what they were going to bring originally to the Imola race and also bring the Spec 2 power unit. So, yeah, Ferrari definitely have more to bring. I can't find it at the moment, but it was, if I remember correctly, it was a few kilos of weight that they cut off the Red Bull car. That makes, in Formula 1, cutting weight makes a lot of difference in Formula 1. And I think that's what made, ultimately, the difference in this Grand Prix, along with the slight pace increase because of the updates to the car. And again, with Ferrari, I can understand why they didn't bring out any upgrades for the sprint race, but, in hindsight, it didn't work. Maybe they should have just took the risk to make sure they stayed ahead, because they really did need to keep momentum on their side. And you never know, if they had brought, an upgrade or two to Imola that they were going to bring, maybe they would have ended up winning the race, or at least finishing in second place. Who knows what could have happened. We'll see what these upgrades for Ferrari do in Barcelona, and whether, it really progresses the car forward far enough to where it's back to where it was, say, at the Australian Grand Prix, where they had a clear advantage over, over Red Bull and really the rest of the field. Now, let me quickly get into now Red Bull. So, Red Bull, like I said, they've had the reliability problems, but the pace is there. They're improving their car. I think Red Bull know exactly what their weaknesses are. I think they know exactly how to improve the car. I think the drivers have absolute confidence in the car. I think the team has confidence in the car. They just need to make sure they get a run of results, really, in the next, between now and the end of June, start of July, really, to start putting pressure on Ferrari and to start closing that gap. And I think, without a doubt, if they can, by mid-season, Red Bull get the gap down to within 10 points, then Verstappen and Red Bull are absolutely, for the second half of the season, favourites to win the championship, because I trust them more. I think they perform better under pressure than Ferrari and Charles Leclerc do. Of course, I am willing to be proven wrong when it comes to Ferrari and Leclerc and whether they can perform under pressure, but the last time we saw them really under pressure, fighting for victories and that, was 2019, the infamous 2019 season. And yeah, it was infamous because every time they got a sniff of a victory, they were tripping over themselves, finding ways to cock it up. They still won 3 races that season, but they could have won 10 in total. They had so many chances that season, and that's the fear I have from Ferrari's side, which I'll get into in a moment. But because Red Bull, they have the experience as a team, Max Verstappen as a driver, His confidence will be sky high, of course, after last year. Even if he didn't win the championship last year, his performances during 2021 I thought were absolutely brilliant, and I thought he was the best performing driver in 2021. Even if Hamilton won the championship at the final race, he was, for me, just consistently the best last season, and looks as though he's carried that form into 2022. And I can't really fault Max Verstappen for anything really he's done this season. The only thing I can really look at him and say could have done better is, qualifying maybe in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. But then again, he went on to win. Yeah, he got a bit lucky. So did Leclerc, but he went on to win. So, you can't really get too bothered about that. So, from a team perspective and a driver perspective, I don't doubt their quality to win the championship. It's just, again, can they stay reliable? If they can, then I think they will win the Drivers' Championship, certainly, with Max Verstappen. And probably the Constructors as well. But I think, again, reliability and whether they have actually sorted it, which I hope they have, because I don't want a championship, no matter who wins it, and I really don't care who wins it, I do not want it to be decided by reliability like it was in 2016, for example, where we could have had Hamilton and Rosberg. I mean, they were fighting to the end of that season, but it could have been even better if it wasn't for the fact that, Hamilton had a couple engine issues during the season. It could have been even better, but, reliability played its role that year. I'm just hoping that isn't the case this season, because we are in for a fantastic scrap between Max and Leclerc. But like I said, if reliability is sorted, if it's bulletproof pretty much for the rest of the season, I mean, of course, they're probably going to have another retirement, whether it's them getting punted off the track, Verstappen making a mistake, or one more, engine issue or fuel system issue, whatever it is. There will be another issue this season for Red Bull, but Ferrari will also have their own. They just need to make sure, Red Bull, they have at least, or at most, rather, as many of those as Ferrari do. They can't afford to be having one or two more, because, that could be the difference between Verstappen and Red Bull winning or losing both titles respectively. But again, as long as reliability is good, then I think Red Bull and Verstappen are still favourites, and I think they can absolutely claw that gap back in both championships. Now, let's go on to the Ferrari team. Now, there is no doubt whatsoever, this Ferrari car is very good. Even though at Imola, they disappointed overall. They weren't quite as quick as I think they expected and they hoped. And as everyone expected and hoped, of course, the whole of Italy were probably expecting a victory, given what we saw 2 weeks before in Melbourne. It was a disappointing performance, but this is still a good car. We will get definitely circuits this season where this car is, sublime looking, probably very soon in Catalonia and Monaco. I think you're probably going to see Leclerc and Ferrari looking very strong around there. And again, there'll be plenty of other races this season where they are right at the sharp end with a very handsome looking car. And they have had a very good start to the season. This has been the best start to the season they've had since 2017, where Sebastian Vettel won the first 2 out of the first 4 races and was leading the championship by how many points? 13, 14 points, I think it was, in 2017 after the first 4 races. And, after the first 4 races this season, Leclerc's leading by 27 points. So it's actually even better this season because of the, what's happened for Red Bull. So don't get me wrong, Ferrari are in a fantastic position. They have a good car. Charles Leclerc is a very good driver, but I just still do not think they have enough to be champions. If they had what in Australia they had, if they could have that for really the majority of the season, where they have a half a second in their pocket in most races, then I think Charles Leclerc would win the championship, because Max is a good driver, is a great driver, but he's not, I don't think, great enough to overturn that type of deficit that it would be if that was the case consistently. Ferrari, though, they don't have that advantage when they do get ahead. Yes, in Australia they had it, but they didn't have that in Bahrain. In Saudi Arabia, it was pretty much equal at best for Ferrari. And then at Imola, Red Bull were probably a tenth or two quicker than the Ferrari team. So I just don't think, if Leclerc was going to win the championship this season, I think really it's going to be down to two things. One, if the Red Bull keeps breaking down, that'll help massively. But secondly, if the Red Bull doesn't break down really that much anymore, then Ferrari are going to have to develop their car to the point where they can be, just simply way too quick for Red Bull. Can they get into that position? I don't think they can. This is a team, historically, that has never really, developed well enough over a season. If you look at the last two championship contending years, 2017 and 2018, they just slowly but surely got worse as the season went on. They were still good, still contending for victory, still could have easily won the championship, still probably should have won the championship, at least in, say, 2018. I think they should have been winning the championship that year. But as the season went on, the car just simply didn't get quicker compared to Mercedes. Mercedes, as the season went on, got better and better. Ferrari got worse. And as the pressure grew, which it does as the season goes on, in a title fight, especially when, Ferrari have a different kind of pressure on them when they're fighting for glory, like a championship, because they have the whole of Italy on their back, and pretty much most of the world that supports or watches Formula One. Because, of course, they are by far the biggest team in terms of fan base, support, all of that. So, because of that, and, because, again, they haven't really developed a car well enough over the course of a season in just so long, I just don't think they'll be able to get into that position where they can be like they were in Australia, just not just winning races, but comfortably winning races, with Leclerc in, benefiting from that and complementing, the car in how good it was. Really, the last time Ferrari were able to improve as the season went on with development was probably 2006, 2007 time. And, back then you had, Jean Todt running the team. Still with some very key players at the team. You didn't have Ross Brawn anymore in 2007, but you did, of course, in 2006. But Ferrari were a much better team and a much better, they were a well-oiled machine, let's say, back then compared to now, where really now they have the car, but I'm not sure they have the team really to bring it home. And like I said earlier, I just don't think they have proven, Ferrari as a team and Leclerc as a driver, I just don't think they've proven that they can handle the pressure consistently to get the results they need to get to win the Drivers' or Constructors' Championship. I just don't think they've proven it yet. Like I said, if they prove me wrong, I will say on this channel, I'll be the first one to say it, I was wrong. They can handle the pressure and they could very well or will bring it home. I'll be the first, to say that. But given, the evidence we have to work off, which really is 2017, 2018, 2019, where they just, again, they would start the season well, and then really from the mid-season point on, they would just crumble under that pressure and drop off. And then with Charles Leclerc, he hasn't fought for a championship before. We've also seen plenty of times in the recent, say, memory where he has, made silly mistakes. Of course, at Imola, a few days ago was one of them. But I'm still not mature. I was going to say the word mature in a moment, but I don't know why it came out then. I'm still not sure he is mature enough. That's what I was going to say. at this point of his career to take Ferrari to the promised land yet. I think if he was a few more years experienced as a racing driver, then I think he probably could and would have definitely a much better chance. But I just don't think at the moment, because, you got to remember, Charles Leclerc is still a young driver. He's nowhere near his prime in terms of what we're going to see from him. Probably in about 5-6 years from now, you'll see probably the prime years, the absolute peak years of Charles Leclerc. He's still a young driver. He's only been in Formula 1 since 2018. Max has been in Formula 1, of course, since 2015. Max has won more races. He's won a championship. He's gone up against the best driver of all time to win that championship. I know some people will say, well, he won it in, dubious circumstances, and I get that, but he still had to go up against, for me, the GOAT of the series and of motorsport in general. I just don't think Leclerc's track record so far really can stand up to what Verstappen's track record is. We'll see if he can stand up to Verstappen and can consistently race him and fight him all season long. I mean, look at last season. I thought Hamilton would just be too good and, his extra experience would carry him through to an 8th World Championship. But Max Verstappen surprised me and proved me wrong. He proved that he could beat Lewis Hamilton and that he was ready. Maybe we'll see the same from Charles Leclerc this season. But again, based off of what evidence we have currently on May the 2nd, 2022, I think they're more likely to just fall away in the second half of the season and crumble. And I don't really think, by the way, that the extra wind tunnel time that Ferrari will have this season will really be a factor, because Ferrari only have like a very small percentage more. It won't make a difference really to the battle. It's really going to come down to who develops their car best in terms of, can they bring upgrades to the car that work? Can they continuously upgrade their car every time they bring something to the car, rather than, one team having extra time over another? I just don't think it's going to come down to that at all. But yeah, I would have to say, on reflection, before we move on, I'd have to say Max Verstappen and Red Bull, I think, are still the favourites to win the championship this year. Like I said, I think they're a better team, better driver, more experienced, mentally tougher, and just stronger in general. And I think they can, as long as they're reliable, I think they will get the job done. And I think they can absolutely get the job done. But guys, let me know in the live chat, the comment section down below. Let me know what you think of all of what I had to say. And let me know what you think of the battle just overall. How do you think these two drivers match up in terms of just a head-to-head? Do you think Leclerc is good enough to beat Max Verstappen over a season in equal-ish cars? Do you think he is able to not crack under pressure? Do you think Ferrari are, will they be able to not crack under pressure? Again, let me know in the live chat and the comment section down below. And let me know, who do you think, after the first 4 races, who do you think is winning the Drivers and Constructors Championship? Like I said, I'm going with Max Verstappen and Red Bull. If you think any different, then let me know in the chat and the comments. I will say that if Leclerc had won, and this shows how close, really, Red Bull and Verstappen were to being out of it in terms of the championship race. If Leclerc had won in Imola and Verstappen had another breakdown or had finished 3rd or 4th, then I'd probably be saying Leclerc's going to win. Honestly, that's how important that Imola race was. Verstappen had to win that race. Even if Leclerc finished 2nd, got the fastest lap and limited the amount of points that Verstappen gained, Verstappen had to win. Thankfully, not only did he win, Perez finished second, and Leclerc made a silly mistake under pressure of, fighting for second place. Important points in the Grand Prix in front of the home crowd. But again, it shows you how vital that race was for the Red Bull team. Now, before I come to any comments in the chat, and before, of course, I move on to the rest of the teams, I just want to say, to anyone new who's watching, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I will be live this weekend for the Miami Grand Prix on Saturday for qualifying and Sunday for the race, so don't forget to come along to that. Bottom right of the screen, you can subscribe right there. And as well, don't forget to smash the like button, share this video and channel everywhere you can. And as well, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. That is on Twitter. And again, if you want to know my schedule at the moment for this weekend and the Miami Grand Prix in general, then stick around to the end of the stream and I will update you guys as to what the plan is at the moment. Because in terms of the Thursday and Friday of the Grand Prix weekend, that's kind of up in the air at the moment as to what I'm doing, because it is dependent on my job. So, like I said, I'll get into that later on. But yeah, let's see what you guys have to say in chat quickly, and then I think we'll move on to the rest of the teams. So yeah, let's just get into it. Tea Time says, hopefully I don't jinx it, going to be Charles. Despite the big point difference in favour of Charles, Max will get him back in my opinion. Josiah says, hope Leclerc wins, can't stand Max or Red Bull. Well, I know a lot of people on Twitter can't stand Red Bull and Max, but yeah, I think they've got a great chance again this season. Crystal Racing, Max will win as long as Red Bull stay reliable, plus high-speed circuits will favour Max and Red Bull, like this weekend. And also Crystal Racing says, we should remember what happened in 2017 and 2018 with Ferrari coughs bottle jobs. Yeah. And that whole year just plays too heavily on my mind. And it really should play heavily on Ferrari fans' mind, because even though, yes, it's been, 3-4 years since the last time Ferrari were in a position to fight for a championship, you've still got a lot of people at that Ferrari team who are still there, who were there at the time of those failures. So it's hard to, if they had completely revolutionized the team and changed out a load of people, then you could say, well, it's a new team. Let's give them a chance and see what they can do. But it's pretty much, in a lot of positions, it's pretty much the same team as the 2018-19 era, except for what do you call it? Arriva Bene, and then you got Simone Resta, who's kind of in and out of that team. By the way, thank you to the person in the chat who said that the championship standings were slightly incorrect. That Stroll on there twice. Let me just update that. There you go. Latifi is in 21st, in case you were wondering. Let's find some other comments here. Who do you think say Regara asks, who do you guys think will win between Sainz and Perez? It seems relatively straightforward, but we'll see. Now, if you asked me before the start of the season, even though we didn't quite know the pace of the cars, I would have said absolutely Carlos Sainz. I love Perez. I think he's very underrated. He's been one of the most underrated drivers in F1 since he came into Formula 1. But Carlos Sainz, I also like a lot. He's a very good driver. And I thought with the car Ferrari had, I thought definitely Sainz would be, if he wasn't in the top two in the championship, I thought he'd definitely be, at worst, third. But this season, Carlos has been so poor. So poor. And I know people may say, well, he hasn't actually been that bad. He's had some bad luck. If you actually look at it, he's not been as good as we expected. Bahrain just wasn't as quick as Leclerc, and Max wasn't on their level. Same with Saudi Arabia, wasn't on their level, wasn't even on Perez's level. I was pretty lucky to beat Perez, to be honest, because he wasn't anywhere near Perez in that first stint of the race in Saudi Arabia. So again, another race where he lacked pace. But again, Bahrain and Saudi, he benefited really with his results through a lucky situation. And then Australia, he was unlucky in qualifying to a certain extent. But then in the race, just again, the mistake he made was so poor, so poor for a driver of his level. Even for any driver on the grid, it'd be a poor mistake to go deep into that corner and spin off into the gravel, on what was it, lap 2, lap 3 out of the race. I was so disappointed when he made that mistake, because I thought, even though he had the poor start, I thought, he was smart enough to just settle down and he would use the pace, the superior pace of his car to his advantage, and then be able to make his way through the field quite quickly, but just got completely flustered in the battle of it all, and then spun off into the gravel. And then, of course, at Imola, yes, he got punted off by Ricciardo, but I don't know why. Since then, I've kind of been feeling that he put himself kind of in that position, because he crashed in Q2, I think, was it, on the Friday in qualifying, which put him back on the grid in P10. Even though he came through, yes, and finishing 4th, it meant really he couldn't get anywhere near Perez, because Perez was 2 or 3 positions higher on the grid, and Perez then started 3rd. And really, it's better to start from the right-hand side of the grid, which is, I think, the pole position side at Imola. Pretty sure it's the pole position side, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. So it's better to start on that side. And Carlos Sainz, of course, was on the other side in P4. Got a poor start, just like his teammate, who was on the same side of the grid. And then, of course, yeah, he was unlucky at getting punted off by his, well, I guess Netflix would say his greatest rival. But I kind of feel as though he put himself in that position. And I know, again, people will say, oh, bad luck. He was, nothing he could do. Which, yeah, to a certain extent, yeah, there's nothing really he could do. But I feel as though he could have helped his situation, really, through not crashing in Friday qualifying, which probably would have seen him qualify up in 3rd on the grid, and then probably finish 3rd in the sprint race. That's an extra point. And then he starts on the clean side of the grid, and then probably if he gets a better start, it's, probably not putting him in a position where he's under threat from Daniel Ricciardo like he was. So yeah, I don't really have that much sympathy for Carlos Sainz. I think he's been poor this season. Last season, we saw at a few races that he was absolutely able to compete with and beat Charles Leclerc at times last season. This season, not at all. Sainz has not been on Leclerc's level one bit. And I think someone was saying in the chat, and it is true, he is already the number 2 driver this season, because he is, how many points behind? 50 points, 48 points behind, I think, in the championship compared to Carlos Sainz. And Ferrari, they're not going to be focusing as equally as much attention on Sainz as they will Leclerc, because Leclerc, they're going to win the championship. It's going to be Leclerc, isn't it, that does it? It's not going to be Carlos Sainz. And I don't think, by the way, Carlos Sainz is going to just turn this around, like that. I just don't think that's going to happen. Maybe in 2 or 3 races, we'll start to see a bit of progression, but yeah, he's been poor. It's been really poor this season. And I would say, given what we've seen from Perez this season, I think Perez is probably likely to beat Carlos Sainz in the championship. Let me see if I can read out a couple more comments, and then we'll get on to the rest of the teams. Charles is naturally more gifted than Max. I disagree with that. That said, Max is going to win this year. Bravamore says, I see Charles as where Max was about in 2018. Bloody quick, but still makes mistakes when pushing. Yeah, kind of. Probably not to the same extent, but yeah, he's kind of in that vein. And then the last one, Josiah says, Leclerc, no doubt, it's good enough. My issue is Ferrari. While I back Leclerc to win the title, I don't think I trust Ferrari just yet. Yeah, I think everyone has trust issues when it comes to them. Now let's go on to Mercedes-Benz. What a terrible start and just utterly shit start to the season it's been for the Mercedes team. We knew coming out of testing they were in a bit of trouble. We knew they were going to start the season off, certainly the first 3, maybe 4 races off the pace, and not be, fighting right up there for pole positions, race wins, but we didn't think it would be anywhere near this bad. Bahrain qualifying wasn't too bad for them, actually, because Hamilton, I think, was only half a second off pole position. It didn't look too bad. Then in the race, even though they got a good result, considering their speed, the pace difference between them and the leaders was clear for all to see. They were 1 second per lap off the pace. That 1 second per lap, you need to remember that, guys, because that is pretty much the common theme between where Mercedes are compared to whoever's leading a Grand Prix or whatever particular race we've been to so far. Mercedes have been consistently 1 second a lap off the pace. That is, if you're only half a second off, you can close that gap and you can get there soon enough with an upgrade and get in that fight. But a second per lap, that's midfield territory compared to whoever's fighting for victories, pole positions, and all of that. Then in Saudi Arabia, they were pretty much a midfield team, Mercedes, because you had Russell having to fight his way past Ocon to finish in 5th place. He did finish in 5th quite comfortably. The Mercedes definitely has better race pace than it does quali pace. And I think there is I think, I won't say a good car in there. I think there's a better car in there than what we've seen this season so far. But it still just isn't fundamentally as good as what we're seeing with Ferrari and Red Bull. But it's definitely better than what we've seen at times, say, in qualifying, where they've been pretty much at their weakest. Lewis Hamilton, of course, what a disastrous weekend he had in Saudi. Qualified in, 16th or 17th place. Had a good race. He did as well as he could have done. But then, of course, he had to pit at the very end and only finished in P10. I think really what cost him was Mercedes' poor strategy. I think they really should have pitted him a lot earlier and gave him a chance to really fight his way through the field in a car that was definitely quick enough to do so. Then in Australia, honestly, I'd say Australia was probably the most positive race they've had so far. They had a decent qualifying. 4th and 5th? Or 4th and 6th, something like that. In Melbourne. And then in the race, the start of the race, they were miles off the pace by the looks of it compared to Ferrari and Red Bull. But once Red Bull started to suffer some tyre problems, Mercedes were on the same pace, if not quicker. But when they weren't on the same pace, they weren't losing anywhere near as much time to Red Bull as they were earlier in the season. So we were starting to see some, encouraging signs for the Mercedes team. But they were still 1 second a lap off the pace of the leading team, which was Ferrari, who were, in a class of their own that weekend. And then when we came to Imola, where I thought they would, after that, I'd say good performance in Melbourne compared to, where they were in Saudi and Bahrain. I thought we would see a slight step up and they would be maybe not a second a lap off the pace of the leaders, but maybe 7 or 8 tenths, which definitely would be a good bit of time to be taking out of those front two teams. They were actually worse. In qualifying and in the sprint race, they were about a second and a half off the pace by the looks of it. Terrible pace. Obviously, the lack of straight line speed doesn't help because they, in the sprint race, they couldn't fight their way through the traffic. In the race on the Sunday, I mean, Russell, on average, was second a lap off the pace of Verstappen, but I think that was massively helped by the amazing start to the race he had, which really is why he finished in fourth place, because I think if he had kind of stayed where he was and had not gotten that start he got, he probably would have suffered the same fate as Lewis Hamilton, unable to make his way past cars with better top-end speed that were clearly slower than the Mercedes car overall. So I think Russell benefited a lot from that. But, credit to him. Great start by him. But yeah, Lewis Hamilton had a disastrous race, got lapped by Max Verstappen, and has spent the entire race staring at either an Aston Martin gearbox or an AlphaTauri gearbox. So yeah, a miserable experience for Hamilton. Russell, like I said, finished fourth in Imola and got really the maximum out of that car in that race. I don't think he could have done any more. And actually, probably shouldn't have even finished in fourth because Bottas was all over the back of him for that position at the very end. And Mercedes came away from the last race having probably the fifth best car, which, I mean, given what we saw in Melbourne, where it looked as though small progress was being made, for them to come to a Grand Prix 2 weeks later and be even worse, how demoralising must that be for their drivers and for some of the team members to see them getting worse? And I know, Mercedes are talking up their upgrades for possibly this weekend, and definitely the Spanish Grand Prix, I think, is where the majority of those upgrades will come. But I just do not see how Mercedes this season are going to turn this car into a race-winning car. I just don't see how they're going to. It is fundamentally broken. It's a car that is horribly unbalanced, especially at the rear. We know the porpoising, the bouncing is just, they have it the worst out of anyone. And really the difference between them and Ferrari, because Ferrari also have this issue, the Ferrari will bounce up and down on the straight, but when it gets to the braking zone, it settles back down and the drivers don't have like a loss of grip because of it. Mercedes, though, they do. When the car does settle back down, they don't have that grip that Ferrari do into the braking zone. And certainly the rear end on the exit of corners is still pretty poor. And we heard, terms of undrivable coming out of the last race in Imola. We'll see what the upgrades can do. And, whether they can limit the damage and they can bring the gap down to the front two by 2 or 3 tenths of a second, which would be a good start, I think, going forward. It would also keep them nicely clear of McLaren for the time being, and would, make sure they weren't under a massive threat from midfield teams, which can't even believe I'm saying that, to be honest. But again, them developing this car to the point where it's going to be race winning, like people thought they would later in the season, I don't see it. I think there's a very good chance they won't win a race with this car. This is going to be a very similar season to what Ferrari had back in, 2005, where 2004, of course, was the last year of their dominance. They had an amazing car. 2005, their car was terrible, really, in all aspects. There was nothing really about it that was positive or that they had an advantage over any other team, really. The only advantage they had is that they had Michael Schumacher, but when he has a dog of a car in that particular season, he couldn't really do anything against Alonso and Raikkonen in that particular season. And I feel the same way this season with Lewis Hamilton, that he's still, for me, the best driver of all time. And I still think that if the car, even if the car is not quick enough, if the car is handling like he wants it to handle, I have no doubt Lewis Hamilton would still be faster than Russell and be the main Mercedes driver. But at the end of the day, Lewis Hamilton, he's not that great. He's not going to turn this car into a masterpiece. Only Mercedes can. Only Mercedes can get this car to the point where it's, contending for pole, winning races, all of that. Lewis Hamilton, of course, has already given up on the championship, and thank God he has, because, there's no point carrying that weight of expectation forward any further when there's clearly no chance he has to win the championship. I mean, we don't even know when the next time he's going to finish on the podium is going to be. Of course, he finished on the podium in Bahrain, but that's been his only podium this season. But yeah, I just think there's no realistic way Mercedes are really going to be a force this season. I just think the concept they've gone for with the floor of their car doesn't work. It's just not what it needs to be. It's not what Ferrari and Red Bull have. It's horribly unbalanced, and with the bouncing and porpoising they do have, they're having to run the car ride height higher. And of course, with these regs, the lower you run your car, the more performance you're going to get out of it. So the higher you run your car, it's going to really hurt you. And I don't see this porpoising issue with Mercedes really going away anytime soon, really. I mean, this weekend in Miami, because it's a street track and we've got some long straights, I guarantee you'll see them bouncing up and down a lot during the weekend. And then, of course, we'll see what happens in the following races after that. But yeah, fundamentally, this car is broken. It's just not a good car. Also, they lack the power. The Mercedes power unit also is just not up to speed. And, I mean, they need to try and get whatever more they can out of that power unit before the freeze officially comes into place on, September 1st? The power units. But, yeah. If you're a Mercedes fan, honestly, the only thing you can do is pin your entire hopes on those upgrades coming possibly this weekend and in Spain in 3.5 weeks' time. If those don't work, season over. I mean, for me, it's still season over, because even if they do work, I don't think Mercedes are going to claw back a full second and be right on the pace of Ferrari and Red Bull. I just don't see that happening at all. Because like I said, I think the concept for that Mercedes have gone for just isn't as good as what Ferrari and Red Bull have, simply. And yeah, I think Mercedes, they're pretty much, I wouldn't say a midfield team, but they're in the middle of nowhere, really. And I think if the next team I move on to, McLaren, if they can keep up the form they're currently in and continue to improve their car, they could be in a fight for third in the championship. Now let's get on to McLaren. And yeah, McLaren, they've had a very topsy-turvy season. First Grand Prix was probably the worst race they've had in about 7 or 8 years. Second race was a pretty great result for McLaren. Lando Norris finishing in P7, getting a lot of points out of that weekend where they were not really contending for that many points at any point of the weekend. But Norris, he did benefit quite a bit from a couple retirements out there. But his driving was fantastic, and it has been still this season. Then in Australia, McLaren really bounced back into life. Norris did, and so did Ricciardo, pretty much the best they could do, finishing in 5th and 6th. And then, of course, Norris had a fantastic weekend at Imola, qualifying 3rd on Friday, finishing 5th in the sprint, and then finishing 3rd in the race, 2 years in a row on the podium at Imola. Daniel Ricciardo had a good weekend, really, up until the race where he punted Carlos Sainz off the track. Just a very poor mistake by him. An experienced racer shouldn't be making a mistake like that. And it's a shame he made that mistake, because he probably could have finished up in, 4th, 5th for McLaren? because the McLaren was looking pretty quick. It was quicker than Mercedes, certainly that weekend. So just so disappointing. Really, really, really was. But it is good to see that McLaren have bounced back, because I was very fearful after what I saw in Bahrain. I thought, oh no, they have gotten this car really, really wrong. I knew that the lack of running and the lack of data they collected definitely played a factor. But even what we saw in the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix, where they weren't that quick, I was like, oh no, they've really not gotten this car right. They're really off the pace this season. And they were looking, clearly slower than teams like Alpine, now for Romeo, and even Haas. And I was thinking, again, this is not good for this McLaren team. But in the last two races, they have bounced back really to how they were last season. Best of the rest, outside of the big teams, and that's pretty much how they were also in 2019 and to a certain extent in 2020 as well. I have to say though, I am still disappointed in McLaren this season. I thought this would be the year when McLaren finally made that step up, not a full step up to the point where they were where Ferrari have been this season, leading the championships, having the fastest car at times. I didn't think they would be that good, but I thought they would be contenders for sure to win races and be close. But they're still not close. Norris, on average, during the race at Imola, was about, 8, 9 tenths at best a lap off the pace of Verstappen. Still, again, just not good enough, not close enough for where they need to be. So even though, season has improved a lot in the last 3 weeks, let's say, I still think they are underperforming massively. 2019, 2020, 2021, every year, really, they were making progress in terms of their speed, and they were closing the gap to the front runners. 2019, they were the fourth fastest team. 2020, maybe they weren't always quick, but they did finish third in the championship, and they did have 2 or 3 podiums, I think, that season, and had plenty of top 6, top 5 finishes even that season, and looked pretty good. Then last year, a race win, a 1-2 finish, could have won the Russian Grand Prix, had a few podiums. It was a year-on-year progression, and it was looking as though they were just that final step away from being there, and they just haven't took it this season. So I'm still really disappointed with McLaren. Maybe with the extra wind tunnel time they do have this season compared to, say, Mercedes and Red Bull, which is not much. It's like between 15 and 20%, I think, compared to those two. It's more likely to be around 15%. I mean, it's not a massive amount they'll have over those two, but maybe they can claw back some of the pace that they're losing to, say, Red Bull, for example. But I just think they've missed a massive chance, McLaren, to really get back to being a race-winning team. And not just a race-winning team, but a race-contending team like they used to be a decade or a decade and a half ago. Even when they weren't at their absolute finest that we've seen in their history, they were still, contending for victories plenty of times. That is what I was hoping they'd get back to, and they just haven't done it. Can't blame the drivers, really. It's just the team haven't come up with a car that's really moved them any further up the grid than they were last season. Anyway, I'll move on to Alpine. I'll just adjust this picture quickly. Alpine have kind of left off where they ended last season. They were pretty quick at the end of last season. They had some good results, strong results with both cars. Alonso, of course, finished on the podium in Qatar, which was the third to last race. And yeah, they were looking pretty quick at the end of last season. I think Ocon also missed out on a podium by what, a few hundred meters in Saudi Arabia. So they were looking very good at the end of last season. Really, I was thinking coming into this season that would actually hurt them because they were seemingly pushing a bit harder with that car last year than they were developing this car, but hasn't really affected them at all. Bahrain, they got a good, double points finish. Saudi, they were probably the 4th best team there. It's a shame Alonso retired because they probably would have scored at least 10 points as a team. Australia, though, was a bitter blow. Ocon, I thought, did well, finishing in P7, but Alonso, if only his gearbox didn't have that issue in qualifying when he was on that spectacular lap. He could have got a podium. He could have, if he didn't get a podium, he would have at least been probably 5th in that race. That's how quick he was in qualifying, really, the whole weekend, and just didn't go right for him. He still had a decent race. He performed well, but because of where he started, because of the tyres he was on, and the strategy that they decided to pursue, they were just on the back foot the entire time, and they ended up not being able to finish in the points. And really, they deserved to score a lot more points from that Grand Prix. Then at Imola, Alonso didn't have the greatest sprint race, but had a good Friday qualifying. Who knows what he could have done on the Friday, not the Friday race, the Sunday race. Who knows what he could have done with that if his car had not been broken by Mick Schumacher's left rear wheel or left rear tyre. Maybe probably could have scored a couple points, but I feel sorry for Alpine. I think they could really be, at the minute, in a really good position. They've missed out on, like Alonso, they've probably missed out on, in Saudi, probably 6 to 8 points with him. And then in Australia, probably at least 10 points, maybe 15. And then in Imola, probably another couple. So, Alpine could probably be, right now, 4th in the championship. And now they're, 6th in the championship behind McLaren and Alfa Romeo? They've been very unlucky. They do have a fundamentally good car here. They just need to have a weekend where they extract it fully and they don't have, engine breaking down, collisions, anything like that. They need to just have a weekend where they extract absolutely everything out of the car and then get the result they deserve. And then I feel as though they'll get the confidence from that and they'll build on that, which is what we saw last season. Once they started getting some better results, they started to build on it and they started to consistently score some good points pretty much every Grand Prix. So that's really what Alpine are missing at the moment. I think they'll get there. I think they're probably the most likely team at the moment to be, say, outside of the top 4 teams, Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren. I think at the moment, the most likely team to cause an upset is probably Alpine. Both drivers are doing very well. Alonso has just had horrible luck. Ocon, you can see, 9th in the championship, only 8 points behind Lewis Hamilton. He's been fantastic, Ocon, this season. And yeah, I just feel as though they're not far away from a very, very surprising but very strong result. I think they can get there. They just need to keep pushing, keep, chasing after it, not get down about, how the season has gone so far, because there's plenty of races left, and I'm sure they will have a podium this season. Not because of pure pace necessarily, but there will be a weekend where, there's rain and Ferrari and Red Bull get it wrong and the door opens like it did in Hungary last year. The door will open and Alpine, I think, sometime this season will walk through it and grab a great result. Now let's move on to the Alfa Romeo team, who have been brilliant. Absolutely brilliant this season, and Valtteri Bottas has been one of the best drivers this season. Who would have thought I'd be saying that after 4 Grand Prix? in 2022. Only 4 points he is behind Lewis Hamilton, his ex-teammate from last season and from years past in the Alfa Romeo. Bottas has been brilliant. Bottas, he was 6th in Bahrain, was heading for a points finish in Saudi, but broke down. Australia, he finished 8th, and then he was 7th in the sprint in Imola, and then 5th in the Sunday race. He's been consistently between, say, 5th and 8th place, and has been getting really the maximum out of that car. And Alfa Romeo have got a good car this season. You could probably arguably say they have the better car than Haas. I think Haas probably have a stronger car over a qualifying lap, which I think it certainly helps when you have Kevin Magnussen in the car, who is just so great at extracting every single bit he can extract out of a qualifying lap. But I think Alfa Romeo have a very, very good package for this season. They're even talking up their chances in Miami, and they're saying that they think they're going to be even stronger in Miami than they were in Imola. And in Imola, they were probably the 4th fastest team overall. So, yeah, very, very good start to the season. I will say with Zhou Guanyu, I think he's been unlucky this season. First Grand Prix, I thought he did well to finish in the points. The second Grand Prix, I can't remember too well what happened with him. I think he had a penalty for, what was it? Speeding in the pit lane or something like that. It was some, a bit of an amateur penalty. I don't know if it was for amateur from the Alfa Romeo perspective or him. And then Australia, I think we can give him a pass because I don't think he's ever raced around there before. But then at Imola, if you look at, so of course the sprint race, he was, he collided with Gasly. Zhou went off the track, hit the wall, and then had to start from the pit lane. And of course at Imola, if you have to start from the pit lane and you're in a midfield car, you're not going to score points at all because you can't really overtake at Imola. But if you look at his pace during the race, he actually, once he got past the back markers, which were Latifi, Schumacher, Ricciardo was back there as well because he had damage to his car, but he, got past him as well. Zhou Guanyu was actually quite a bit faster than that pack of cars that Lewis Hamilton was in, which was Stroll, Ocon, Albon, Gasly, Hamilton. Zhou was quicker than all of them because if you look at the end of the race, he was lapping quite a bit faster. So he had the pace that weekend to get a good result. He just had bad luck, really, with where he started and how the weekend went. And of course, with the sprint being that weekend, because if he started the race from where he qualified, which is 14th, he probably would have finished in the points, given the pace we saw from Alfa Romeo and him in the race towards the end of the race on that Sunday. So I can't complain too much about Zhou Guanyu's season so far. I think once we get into the European season, around racing around tracks that he has raced around before, you will start to see this guy get some good finishes. This weekend is a new experience for everyone, so that'll benefit him. That no one has an advantage over him coming into this particular Grand Prix. But then again, when we get to Spain, Monaco, Baku, and then the other European tracks, Austria, Silverstone, all that, you'll start to see Zhou Guanyu, I think, get a few points finishes in there, as long as Alfa Romeo continue this great start to the season. And also, another Ferrari-powered team who's had a great start to the season is the Haas F1 team. But even though they've had a great start to the season, I still feel as though they haven't maximised their potential so far this season. Bahrain, really, I think they couldn't have got any more out of what they had that weekend. Saudi probably could have got a couple extra points, but it's not a massive amount they were missing out on with what they had. Australia, they just couldn't get the car dialed into the track. But Imola, I feel as though there was more there than I feel as though there was a bigger chance for them at that Grand Prix. Magnussen still, he did well, finishing 9th place. That's still a decent result. But I still feel as though Haas F1 could have done better so far this season. Because if you look again at qualifying so far this season, Haas have been very good, especially with Kevin Magnussen. They do have a good car. They have a car that can match Alfa Romeo, if not beat them in qualifying, but then in the race they just don't simply have the pace. Which we have seen in the last few years that Alfa Romeo tend to be a better race team than Haas. Haas have had these issues for years, but of course these cars are pretty much completely different. But I think it's because Alfa Romeo are where they are in terms of, they're also a Ferrari powered team who have had the same amount of benefits in terms of being able really to concentrate on the 2022 cars without really losing out on anything major. I still feel as though I still feel as though Haas, can be doing more when Alfa Romeo are in 5th in the championship and Haas are 8th, which, given the pace we've seen from Haas this season, 8th in the championship just doesn't sound that good. They have been better than that, but they just haven't quite executed on a Sunday. If they had, followed through with the qualifying results they had gotten from what we've seen this season, Haas would have been probably up there in 5th or 6th place. They've been that good this season. I have to say, another driver, along with, say, a Carlos Sainz, who I feel as though has really had a poor start to the season, is Mick Schumacher. He has to step up. He has to step up. He has now a representative teammate in, in Kevin Magnussen. It's a team that, Mick has got to know now over the last year. Mick also would have had more practice and more time with the team, with the car, for the 2022 regulations. Kevin, of course, was only signed like a week and a half before the first Grand Prix, where he spectacularly, Kevin, got 5th place. I just feel as though Mick has been really poor because he's not just been slower than Kevin, he's been destroyed so far by Kevin. Kevin annihilated him in Bahrain. In Saudi, yeah, Mick made had a crash, but it was his own mistake that led to the crash. So, at the end of the day, you have to pin the blame on him. Thankfully, he walked away from that accident, but again, made that mistake at a pressurized time in qualifying. Melbourne didn't really matter because they were both shit slow. And then Imola, I felt as though he had a decent weekend in Imola, really up until the race on Sunday, where he had a good start. He got up to, I think, 9th or 10th place and then just ridiculously spun at the exit of the Tamburello chicane. And really his mistake was so amateur, just too aggressive over the curbs, too trigger happy on the throttle. Again, such an amateur young driver mistake. And I know he's young, but you should know that if you clump the curbs too hard in the wet, that there is a very, 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 very high chance you're just going to spin. I mean, Formula 1 cars spin pretty easily if you're slightly offline in the dry. So in the wet, if you're clumping a curb too hard, I mean, you're asking for punishment, really. And I think Mick has got to step up his performance. I mean, this is a guy who supposedly is supposed to be, in the future, a Ferrari driver, a driver fighting at the front of the field. I don't see any of that. I see at best, a midfield driver right now in Mick Schumacher. If anyone from Haas F1 is going to be racing for Ferrari in the future, it should be Kevin Magnussen, not Mick Schumacher. Because Kevin, like I said, is absolutely annihilating him in that car. I know Kevin's quick, don't get me wrong. Kevin is a very quick driver, but he literally jumped in the car a week before the season and has already asserted dominance in a month and a half. It's not good enough. from Mick's point of view. He's got to improve, and he's got to improve fast. Now, let's move on to our final three teams. AlphaTauri. It's weird with AlphaTauri because they're 7th in the championship, which isn't that bad. But they feel as though they've been bad this season. I mean, of course, Bahrain, I think Gasly retired from the race. Tsunoda, I think, scored points in that Grand Prix, but it wasn't anything major. I think it was at 8th place, I think, in that Grand Prix for Tsunoda. And then Saudi, I can't remember if they scored any points there. I don't think they did. Australia, I think Gasly just scored a couple and did pretty well to score a couple points because AlphaTauri were in a massive fight for those points positions with so many different cars, so many different drivers. But then Imola, I mean, Tsunoda, he did a fantastic job, but I don't feel as though that was really down to the car. I feel as though it was kind of down to him driving so well. Gasly, of course, had a frustrating race and really a poor weekend, finishing down in, 12th place in the AlphaTauri in a massive train, trying to score a point. Like I said, whilst his teammate Tsunoda was up in 7th place. And as you can see there, Tsunoda is ahead of Gasly in the Drivers' Championship by 4 points. Even if Gasly had finished that race in Bahrain, I'm pretty sure in the championship it would still be Tsunoda leading, or maybe it'd be equal, or maybe Gasly leading by like a point. It's just not been that kind of impressive season we've seen from AlphaTauri in the last couple of years. Gasly has not been himself. I don't know what it is. I don't know if he's mentally in another place in terms of he's thinking about his own career. You know, where does he want to be in the future? Is he focusing on getting to Red Bull for 2023 and beyond, which honestly, with the way Sergio Perez is performing, I don't see happening. And if he doesn't go to Red Bull, then where does he go? Does he stay at AlphaTauri for another year? Which I know he doesn't want to do because he is better than a team like that. No disrespect to AlphaTauri, but Gasly should be fighting in a car and a team better than that. And I kind of feel as though that might be playing on his mind because he's had 2 to 2.5 years of great performances and he hasn't been rewarded for it. And I think that's got to be frustrating. You know, you've put in amazing performance after amazing performance. You've stunned everyone with your driving and your pace, and yet you're still in the same place you were when you started doing those great performances. It's it's like a football player scoring 30 goals a season for a mid-table Premier League team, but still 3 years later playing for that same team and not playing for one of the top teams. That's kind of what it feels like with Gasly. I feel as though he's disappointed really on where his career has gone and is going at the moment. Maybe that's playing a role in his performance. But credit to Yuki Tsunoda, by the way. He's definitely improved on last season. That performance he had at the end of last season, the very end, where he finished 4th in Abu Dhabi, I think has given him the confidence going into this season. But again, with Gasly, I still feel as though he's not at his best. And I think we are yet to see the Gasly of last season or the Gasly of 2020 so far this season. And I think also playing a factor is the AlphaTauri car. It's not as good as it was last season. It's not as aerodynamically stable and just as good as it was last season. The only benefit from driving this car is the Red Bull powertrain it has, which is very strong and very quick in a straight line. But it's not been, I think, anywhere near as good of a start to the season as they were hoping. Now let's go to Aston Martin, who had a fantastic result in Imola of 5 points for the team. Vettel finishing 8th, Stroll finishing 10th. Now, I do think the result in Imola was helped a lot by the conditions. It was a wet, dry weekend the whole weekend. I think really, if it was a dry weekend, the whole weekend, I don't think they would have finished in the top 10, because in the race, especially when it started to dry out more and more, you saw the Aston Martin cars start to struggle a bit more and start to fall back, especially Sebastian Vettel, who came under more pressure as the race went on. When in the wet, he was not really under pressure. He was more so looking ahead than behind. So I think, again, the conditions did play a role in helping Aston Martin there. But even though they had a good result at Imola, poor season so far. They are performing way below expectations. They should be really, with Alfa Romeo and Alpine in the championship. That's where Aston Martin really should have been at this point of the season, not down in 9th place. They had a shocking start to the season. The Australian Grand Prix was just a complete joke, where they looked like a backmarker team who had just entered Formula One and clearly weren't ready or even adequate at the Formula One level. With the amount of breakdowns, problems, it was just so embarrassing. Made Sebastian Vettel look like an absolute idiot, which I know he won't have enjoyed, but thankfully for him, he was able to drag out somehow an 8th place at Imola, which probably is one of his best drives in the last 2 or 3 years. What he did a week or so ago. But yeah, still, despite that result, they have been shockingly poor this season. And in say 4 or 5 races time, if they're still 9th in the championship, they may as well just give up on this car, because their aim for this season really had to be top 5 in the championship, say 5th place, to be realistic. They're nowhere near that, and I don't think they'll be anywhere near that this season. So yeah, very poor season for Aston Martin. Just, it's incredible they've got it this wrong. Hopefully next season they can make a step up. Hopefully the personnel they've hired can actually start, doing their wonders. And hopefully all the money that Lawrence Stroll has spent isn't going to waste. Now finally we'll go on to Williams. And Williams, Alex Albon, I have to say, has been one of the, like Bottas, underrated drivers of the season. He's been very, very good. He probably deserved a point in Imola for what he did. Williams was nowhere near as quick as the cars he was racing, yet he was right in there in the scrap and was only, a second or so away from finishing in the top 10. And yeah, he was just absolutely fantastic. So well done to him. And of course, in Australia, he was probably one of the drivers of the day, finishing P10, doing a super long stint on the hard compound tyre, and then pitting on the last lap pretty much for a soft compound tyre. And yeah, he was absolutely brilliant. So I can't fault him. Latifi has been poor, but I think Latifi, what he went through over the winter with the abuse he had, I think is absolutely playing on his mind. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. And it is a shame what he had to go through over the winter, because it wasn't his fault what happened. It was literally not his fault. It's absolutely disgraceful, but that's life for you. The world is full of see you next Tuesdays, let's say. Yeah, but he has been, you have to say, a bit of a comedy act this season. Hopefully can just settle down and just be a bit more quieter at the back of the grid, because every safety car or yellow flag that comes out, you just assume it's this guy in the Williams. And I'm sure with what happened at the very end of last season, that's not helping him break that mental block that I'm sure he had a bit of, depression at the end of last season because of what was going on there. But in terms of the Williams car, I think Williams are probably heading for last place in the championship, really. I just don't see where they're going, Williams. I thought they would hopefully be, they are kind of with Albon fighting for a point here and there, but they're just still dead slow. We'll see with the extra wind tunnel time they'll have compared to other midfield teams, whether that works, whether they, by the end of the season, can get to a point where they're contenders for points on a more regular basis. But it just feels like same old same old Williams we've seen since 2018. Just back of the grid, basement dwellers, really. Of course, 2021 was obviously a much better season, finishing in 8th place, but this season feels like just a regression back to what we saw again in 2018, 2019, and 2020 from this team. Now I'll go back on to some pictures from the more front-running teams. So, guys, let me know in the live chat and the comment section. What do you think of what I had to say about those teams? And, yeah, just give me your thoughts in the chat and the comment section. And I will read out some comments in a moment. And then we'll get on to a couple bits of news next in this stream. Again, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Bottom right of the screen, do it right there. And as well, don't forget to smash the like button, share this video, and channel everywhere you can. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. Let's find some comments here, if we can, and then we'll move on. Brother Moz asks, you think Hamilton will be here next year? If not, who gets the seat? I think he will. I don't think he's going to give up. I think realistically what will happen is, if the Mercedes car next season is better but still not, you know, the team or the car of old, then I think next season will probably be his last season in Formula 1. Because, again, if the car is improved next season, but it's still not quite what it needs to be, I don't think he's keen for, you know, a few years fighting for 3rd and 4th place. He wants to be fighting for 1st place, and he deserves to, because he is, again, he's the GOAT. So that's what he's in racing for. And I don't think you're going to be able to convince him to stay around too long. Again, fighting for positions that don't interest him, such as 3rd and 4th place. Bravum also says, I wish Ricciardo stayed at Renault/Alpine. He was creating a good thing there. In hindsight, yeah, he probably should have stayed at Renault, because, I mean, he's gone to McLaren and just become a number 2 driver, really. And this year, they seem Alpine to have a decent car. So, yeah, he probably should have stayed. But at the time, I probably would have gone to a McLaren as well. And, yeah, McLaren last season were better than Alpine. And this season, they look better. Not miles better, but better. But you got to ask yourself, would you rather be a number 2 driver in an upper midfield team, or a number 1 driver in a slightly slower midfield team? You'd probably want to be a number 1 driver in a slightly slower midfield team, wouldn't you? I mean, yeah, he won the Italian Grand Prix, of course. He'll never forget that. That was a great moment and all, but I think he went to McLaren for not just that. Right, let's see if there's any other comments I can read out. Hello to Nib, by the way, in chat. Let's see if there's anything else I've missed out on. Miss Marquise says, sadly, I don't think Ricciardo has been considered a lead driver for more than a year. Yeah, I've said this in my driver lineup prediction video, which I will admit was ambitious. It was very ambitious. I was kind of going for that in a way, but the predictions I made were legitimate. I wasn't like just going for predictions that I don't believe at all are going to happen. I came up with a scenario that I thought was believable for the season that would cause things to happen. Obviously, it's not happened that way, but, you know, it's a prediction at the end of the day. It's not, we're not holding crystal balls. Yeah, with Ricciardo, I just feel as though his where he is in F1, so he's, like I said, he's pretty much number 2 at McLaren. If he leaves McLaren, which his contract ends, is it next year, I think, at McLaren? I think it is, end of next year. I don't see, unless McLaren can't find anyone better who they can realistically go and get, I don't see McLaren keeping him, because he's not, even though he's not doing a bad job for someone who is the slower of the two, he isn't what they signed him for. He's not. They signed him because of the value he had at the time, which was a driver who, whenever an opportunity popped up for a great result, Ricciardo was always in there getting those great results. And of course, he did that last season, winning the Italian Grand Prix, but that was really the only race last season he did that. But yeah, he, for the value they signed him for in 2020, he isn't worth that anymore. He just isn't worth that. He's not the same driver. He's nowhere near as good as what we saw in 2020 or even years, in years previous. And if this continues for the next, this season and next season, I don't see why McLaren would keep him, because, like I said, he's not provided the value to the team that they thought he would when they signed him. They thought when they signed him he would be kind of a like for like replacement for Carlos Sainz, in that he would be pretty much equal with Norris in performance and maybe just about ahead because of how good he was and the experience he had, which was, and still is, to a certain extent, an advantage over Norris. Now, Norris has improved massively as a driver, but I don't think we saw Ricciardo's performances that have been, a lot of them have been poor. I don't think we saw, that really coming. And I think, for the 2024 driver market, if there is a Gasly available, I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised if McLaren decide to go with Gasly, because if Ricciardo just keeps doing what he did last season on a consistent basis and keeps doing what he's been doing this season, which is no real different to last year, then I don't really see what McLaren can really get out of Daniel Ricciardo that they were hoping they would get out of him. Still, though, like I said, he won a race for McLaren. That's, still massive credit to him for doing what he did there, but he has not been. He has been, since the start of 2021, he's been one of the most disappointing drivers since the start of 2021, for sure. Probably, you say him. Who else would you put in that category? Not sure who else you would put in that category. There's not been too many drivers, actually, that have been that disappointing. But I think he's definitely been one of them. Maybe the number one most disappointing driver since he moved to McLaren. But yeah, I don't see why, if he keeps these performances up, why they keep him. Let's see if there's any other comments here I can find. No, not really. Let's try, I think, move on to these next couple news topics. So, one news topic that we'll just quickly skim over is that the F1 teams have unanimously, it appears, agreed to up the sprint races from 3 that it is this year to 6 for next year. That, of course, is unfortunate news, because the sprint race is it's still a shit idea. We saw at Imola, it ruined the weekend because it allowed faster cars to just get into their natural positions. And it ruined what could have been an even better race on the Sunday had cars been out of position for the race on Sunday on the grid. It ruined the weekend. It absolutely did. I still liked the race on the Sunday, but it was definitely ruined by the sprint. Of course, though, Ross Brawn will claim that everybody loved it and that, it's the greatest idea since sliced bread. Of course it is. He will never provide any evidence behind, the claims that everybody loves his idea or these ideas and that young people love it and all this. Again, there will never be substantial, clear evidence provided behind this to justify it, but this is the way it's going, unfortunately. The continued Americanization of Formula One, and it's just, again, the sprint race is just not. It's not the way forward. It's not working, and they need to get rid of it. And also, they've decided to come up with a new rule for next season. They're going to be trialing at 2 races next season in 2 separate qualifying sessions, where they're going to trial a new qualifying system where in Q1, you're only going to be allowed to use the hard compound tyre. Then in Q2, you're only allowed to use the medium. And then in Q3, you're only allowed to use the soft. Why? What difference is it going to make? I don't get it. It literally has no purpose. I don't get why there has to be these tyre differences. Like I said, it doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's one of the most pointless alterations to qualifying I've ever seen. And it will make a difference, by the way. It will make a difference to certain people's qualifying efforts and all that, because of course certain cars perform differently on different tyres and all of that. It's just, again, it's so ridiculous. And why do they keep doing this? Stop trying to fix something that isn't broke. Qualifying is fine. There's a reason why we've used the Q1, Q2, Q3 system since 2006. It's because it's the only qualifying system everyone could agree on since then, until Bernie, tried to mix things up, ended up making things 10 times worse. And then Liberty, with the sprint race, and now with this, it's like, just why? Fix the issues that are actually causing the product to not be as good as it could be, instead of ruining it with pointless changes that will make a difference. Nobody, I've not heard one person say, the way to fix qualifying is to mandate what tyres can be used in each session. I mean, we have said the, get rid of the Q2 tyre rule, or get rid of the rule of what, you have to use the tyres used in qualifying to start the race on. There's been arguments about that, but not to do with you have to use a certain tyre for every stage of qualifying. Nobody has asked for this, yet we're getting it. Could they not, they're supposed to be for the fans, yet they don't pick on or bring to the table ideas that has actually ever been discussed by fans. The only ideas that actually get trialed are ideas that nobody's ever thought of and everybody agrees on is shit. It's just so frustrating. It's so frustrating. They're just... I'm not going to go over the board with what I'm going to say here, but stuff like this and the whole sprint race stuff, it does make me fall out of love slightly more with F1. I'm still in love with F1. I still love Formula 1 a lot, but stuff like this makes me love it less. And I'm scared that they're going to keep doing this and keep making things worse until the point where people like me, who love Formula 1 for what it should be, won't be able to watch anymore because it's unwatchable and is basically just a video game. I just... No, please do not. Please do not. Stop ruining Formula 1. If you're going to alter things, at least alter the stuff that people have talked about, talked about, things that could be changed in Formula One. Don't just come up with pointless bullshit like this. Honestly, it's so frustrating. Anyway, let's go on to the, I guess, final piece of news, which is a massive piece of news when it comes to Formula One. And from 2026 onwards, thankfully, I'm still covering Formula One in 2026. We are going to get a very exciting era of Formula One. Let me just share my screen quickly. And there you go. So, this is an article on Reuters, and the VW CEO announced today that Audi and Porsche will join Formula One officially in 2026. Finally, they have committed. Here is the story. The VW Group and their premium brands, Audi and Porsche, will join Formula One after convincing the German automaking group that the group will move. The move will bring in more money than it will cost. VW Chief Executive Herbert, I'm not going to pronounce that last name because I'll get it wrong, said on Monday. Discussions by the board of directors about the two brands' plans had created some divisions, said the CEO, or the Chief Executive, sorry, at an event in Wolfsburg, where the German car maker is headquartered. But ultimately, the brands, which next to VW's China's business are the group's most important income suppliers, made the case they would pull in more money with a Formula One commitment than without one. And then, let me just scroll down because it gets a bit more juicier as to what their plans are. He said on Monday that Porsche's preparations for entering Formula One were a little more concrete than Audi's. So this is the... I don't think this is absolutely confirmed, but this is, I think, the sources behind these stories are firm, and I don't think they're weak. So Audi apparently is ready to offer around 500 million euros for British car maker, of course, F1 team McLaren, as a means to enter, a source told Reuters in March, which Porsche intends to establish a long-term Porsche intends to establish a long-term partnership with the team Red Bull starting in several years' time, which would be probably in 2026. Now, let me just click off of this screen share and come back to these pictures. I'm obviously very excited that we're going to get Audi and Porsche. I think you'd struggle to find that many people who are disappointed, but I feel as though I could be disappointed with how they enter Formula One. I don't mind Porsche linking up with Red Bull. I think that's great. That's fantastic. I don't see a problem with that because, of course, Red Bull, even though they are still kind of partners with Honda is still helping them out. They're pretty much on their own and will become, more independent as years goes on. So I don't have a problem with that. But I don't want Audi buying McLaren's entry or buying McLaren. I don't want that. We need McLaren on the grid. That should not be under threat. Now, if Audi wants to buy Sauber, which is, the Alfa Romeo team, basically, if they want to buy Sauber or even Williams, I don't necessarily have a problem with that because at least with Williams, yes, even though Williams are a famous name also, and we don't want to lose the Williams name, Williams are going nowhere. They're dead. They're absolutely done. And I don't mean that in terms of, I don't mean dead in that way. I mean in terms of the performance of the team in the last few years. They haven't done anything for 4 or 5 years. They're rooted to the back of Formula One. They're probably not going to move up the grid for years, at best, for years, unless they, can get another great driver in their car, like a Russell, and be in a better position when they get that great driver into their car. Unless they can get into that type of position again, I just don't see how Williams are going to be nothing other than a backmarker team. So I wouldn't mind if Audi even took over, them. But I just, Audi buying McLaren or buying their entry, I'm just thinking, no, that's wrong. We need McLaren on the grid. I mean, I would love it if Audi entered their own F1 team, but I don't think they're going to do that because I think they want to copy the Mercedes formula, where Mercedes, when they re-entered Formula 1 in the 90s, they re-entered as a engine manufacturer and then, progressively grew in their influence in Formula 1 with Sauber, and then they obviously went to McLaren, and then they were partners with McLaren for a while, and then eventually they became their own team, buying out the Braun GP team. Now, Audi, of course, if they bought McLaren as an entry, they would probably take over their entire headquarters and all of that. But we just can't lose McLaren. We can't lose McLaren. That would be such a shame if we were to lose McLaren. But I think Audi are probably realistically, and I think it's probably the best decision that Audi buy. That they buy a team rather than start their own. Because if you look at, say, Toyota, who started their own team back in 2002, it was probably not the best decision. I think in hindsight, Toyota back then probably should have bought, say, Prost or Jordan or some type of team like that who were already established in Formula 1 and already had people who were, able to navigate Formula 1 successfully to a certain extent. So I think Audi will probably, and rightfully so, try to get a deal with someone, but just let's hope it's not McLaren, because I just think that would be a disaster, honestly. But great news that Audi and Porsche are coming to Formula 1 officially. That means we'll have, in terms of manufacturers, Mercedes, Ferrari, Renault, still a manufacturer. Hopefully McLaren are still, they are still technically a car maker, manufacturer, what you want to call them. And then obviously Audi and Porsche. You've got Aston Martin. So many great names. Dreams come true, finally, for us in 2026. And hopefully we don't lose any great names from the grid. That would be a shame. But great to see that Audi and Porsche are back. Not back, but they have finally stepped up to the plate for Formula 1. And it'll be very interesting to see what they do. I mean, we've already heard, or I've seen news stories today, that Audi, if they do enter their own Formula 1 team, they're very keen on having 2 German drivers, which I think is not a good idea, because the German driver market, the driver pool in Germany has got progressively worse since Michael Schumacher retired. So I think that is a bad decision. They need to just go for whoever the best drivers are available. I know they want to be, all German proud, I guess, about it. But like I said, the German driver pool is really not that good at the moment. So I don't think that's the greatest decision. But hopefully they will, make good enough decisions to see them in a competitive state when they do enter Formula 1 in, 4 years, 3.5 years from now. And also, it looks as though we're going to be getting the German Grand Prix returned to the calendar probably in 2 to 3 years' time at Hockenheim. So great to see that. And of course, with Audi and Porsche coming to Formula 1, and then, of course, you've got Mercedes already on the grid. I don't see why we shouldn't have a German Grand Prix. But I think that's pretty much, guys. I've been live for 2 hours now, just over 2 hours. I think that is pretty much it, I'd say, for this stream. I'm just trying to think, is there anything else that I've missed? I can't think of anything else. No. I'm just looking on Twitter. No, there's nothing else. So what I'm going to quickly do before I finish is I'm going to get into what the plan is for this weekend. So at the moment, I have a job where it's a 0-hour contract job. I'm not going to get into what the actual job is, but it's a 0-hour contract job. So I don't know for sure some weeks when I am working on certain days. I am working, for example, tomorrow, but for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, at the moment, I'm not working, but I think they haven't sent out notifications as to shifts for those particular days as of yet, because of course it's been a bank holiday weekend pretty much. So I don't know about those days yet. So with Thursday and Friday, there is a 50-50 chance I will stream on those days. It depends on whether I'm at work. If I'm not at work, I will probably be doing a stream on Thursday, doing a preview for the Miami Grand Prix. And then Friday, I'll probably be doing a Practice 1 and Practice 2 watch-along live for the Miami Grand Prix. Again, that's if I'm not at work. Also, if I don't get any work for Wednesday, there could be a stream on that day. As soon as I know that I won't be at work, I will let you guys know as soon as possible if I'm going to do a stream on that day instead of, obviously, working. Now, for the weekend, I will definitely be streaming. So I'll be firstly going live for the Practice 3 watch-along. I'm not sure of the timings yet. I haven't looked at the timings as of yet, but I'll be going live for a Practice 3 watch-along and, of course, a qualifying watch-along. And earlier on Saturday, I will be doing a qualifying preview stream, probably earlier in the afternoon. So there'll be 3 streams, actually, on Saturday. And then on Sunday will be the usual race preview, race watch-along, and race reaction. And then on Monday, there might be a stream, but again, it depends on whether I'm at work or not. So we'll see whether that happens. But again, when it comes to me streaming on either Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday this week before we get into the proper Grand Prix weekend, I will let you guys know as soon as I know. If I'm not at work, or if I think the night before, say, if I'm thinking maybe I could stream on Thursday or Friday, if the night before it's not looking likely that I'm going to work, then I'll probably put preparations in place to do streams on those days for you guys. So that's what's going to be happening this weekend for the Miami Grand Prix. And can't wait to see what the new Grand Prix track with the definitely not fake harbour has to offer us this weekend in Miami. So don't forget to join us, guys, if you are new to the channel, for the Miami Grand Prix this weekend. Bottom right of the screen, you can subscribe to the channel right there if you are new around here. As well, smash the like button and share this video and channel everywhere you can. And don't forget as well to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. And don't forget to join my Discord server, link below in the description, for more content like this. But guys, until my next stream, which at the moment, it could be Thursday, could be Friday, but could be probably Saturday. I'll let you guys know as soon as I know. Until then, guys, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.